Well, hello and welcome to this English lesson where I'm going to talk about jobs and work. So, jobs and work is an interesting topic. Many people who watch my English videos do actually have jobs or they're looking for a job. Sometimes you want to learn English because you want to get a job where if you know the English language, maybe you'll get a job that pays more. Maybe you'll get a job that's just more interesting for you. I know some of you are actually students as well, but someday you'll be done school and you will also be looking for work or looking for a job. So I've used the word job and I've used the word work. And these two words kind of work together when you're talking about having a job. When you have a job, so let me just back up a bit. When you use the word job, you say things like, I have a job, or I'm looking for a job, or he doesn't have a job right now. So a job is something that you do for money. It's when someone decides to hire you, and then when you have a job, that person pays you. Work is a more general word. Work refers to anything you do that requires physical activity or thinking, and you don't always get paid for it. Sometimes you do housework, sometimes you do yard work, sometimes you work for someone and get paid, sometimes you don't have work and you're looking for work. So I've just used the word work in a whole bunch of different ways, not to confuse you, but just so you have a sense that we do use the word job and we do use the word work. Not interchangeably, but we use both of them when we talk about doing something for money or doing something that needs to be done. There's often many Saturdays where I have to do a lot of work around the house. And then on Monday, I go to work because I have a job. Okay, let me repeat that for a sec. There are many weekends where I have to do a lot of work around the house. I do work inside the house. I do work outside the house. And that means little things like fix a light switch or clean up the yard. And then Monday morning, I go to work because I have a job. Okay, so just a few different ways to use that. Let's talk about a more formal word, which is the word employed. When you have a job, you are employed. Okay, so I am employed right now. I am employed by the school that I work at. They have employed me as a teacher. So this is definitely a more formal way of talking about having a job. Someone might say to you, where are you working right now? And you can say, I'm currently employed by the school board to teach high school. So again, it simply means the state of having a job if you are employed. Of course, the opposite would be the word unemployed. So when you're unemployed, you're probably sad. You probably would like to have a job. You are probably looking for work. When you are unemployed, it's not very fun to sit at home knowing that all of your friends have jobs. It's not very nice to be unemployed. I was unemployed once in my life. A long time ago, when I moved to the province of Quebec, I was unemployed for an entire month and I was running out of money. When you are unemployed, if you have a certain amount of money in the bank, you slowly start to use up that money. It was not very enjoyable to be unemployed. So once again, when you are employed, you have a job. When you are unemployed, you don't have a job. When you are unemployed, there's two phrases we use. We say that you are looking for work or you are looking for a job. So it's kind of funny because we use these almost equally. I know when I was unemployed, I went out and I was looking for a job every day. I was constantly looking for work. I worked for my landlord a little bit, but I went to different restaurants and I went to different places that were hiring and I applied for a job there. So when you are unemployed, you are definitely looking for work or looking for a job. So there's two kinds of workers. The first kind of worker is the kind of worker that you want to be. You want to be a hard worker or you want to be a good worker, okay? You want your boss to like you. When your boss gives you jobs to do, you want to work at them very diligently. When you do something diligently, you do it really well. You want your colleagues and your coworkers to know that you're a good worker. because if there's a project you have to do together, you want them to want to work with you. I always try to be a really good worker and a hard worker at the jobs that I have. Right now as a teacher, I think I work pretty hard. I think I work pretty hard, and I think I am a good worker. Now, let me tell you one other thing. There's a difference between being a hard worker and if something is hard work, okay? So when you're a hard worker, your boss tells you what to do, and you do the job, and you're happy, and you do it well. But when you need to do something that we would describe as hard work, it means the job is going to be difficult. So notice a little bit of a change there. If Jen said to me, I need you to dig 10 holes in the ground on the farm, that would be hard work. That would certainly be a difficult thing to do. The opposite, of course, is a bad worker. You don't want to be a bad worker. A bad worker is lazy. A bad worker makes mistakes. A bad worker is often late for work. So I've just used a number of different ways to describe a bad worker. You don't want to be a bad worker. You don't want to take extra long lunch breaks. You don't want to be late for work every day. You don't want your colleagues to be annoyed with you because when you do a job, you make lots of mistakes. You do not want to be a bad worker. That's just not a good idea. So let's talk a little bit more about the word employ. So employ is a verb which means to hire someone. And it's where we get employee, employer, employed, unemployed from. An employer is the place where you work. Okay, it's not your boss. So for me, I have a boss, but my employer is the school. If I was filling out a form and the form said, where do you work? I would write the place where I work. And if it said, who is your employer? I would write the place where I work. Okay, so my employer is the school board. My employer is not the boss. If you worked at McDonald's, your employer would be McDonald's, not the person who is the boss at the restaurant. If you worked at Starbucks, your employer is Starbucks, not the person who runs the coffee shop. So just a little bit of a difference there between boss and employer. And then you are an employee. When you have a job, you are an employee. This again is a more formal term. If someone said to me, oh, are you an employee at that school? It would sound kind of strange. We don't really use the word employee that way. It's correct. They would more likely say, do you work at that school? And I would say, yes, I work there. But if I was filling out an official form, it might ask me if I have been an employee at a certain company in the past, or are you currently an employee at this place of business? So it's kind of a formal term for a worker. It's not used a lot in everyday speech. I wouldn't say to, Brent from American English with this guy, at what school are you an employee? It just sounds very formal. It's not incorrect. Or like Rod, the Brazilian English teacher, I wouldn't say to Rod, let me see here, are you an employee at the local high school? Like it's right, but it sounds a little bit weird. I would, though, say this. I could ask someone who is an owner of a business, how many employees do you have? That would be something that we would actually say when we're speaking English. So just more of a formal term for someone who is a worker. There's a few kinds of jobs. One is a part-time job. The other is a full-time job. When you have a part-time job, you don't work a full work week. A full work week in Canada is around 40 hours per week. If you are full-time, you work at least 40 hours per week. So usually you work an 8 to 9 hour day, Monday through Friday. When you are part-time, you work maybe 6 hours a week, maybe 30 hours a week, maybe 20 hours per week. So you are definitely a part-time employee. A lot of times students who are in university will look for a part-time job, and then they will be a part-time employee at that place of business. When I was in university, I worked at the audiovisual department, and I worked there part-time. Okay, I had a part-time job at the audiovisual department of my university. So again, a part-time job is less than 40 hours per week. A full-time job is usually 40 hours per week or more, okay? Sometimes, like my sister has a full-time job and she works about 44 hours per week. My sister has a full-time job. I think I said full-time. My brother has a full-time job and he works about 42 hours per week. It really depends. Once you work more than 45 or 50 hours, that's considered what we call overtime, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. There are two ways to get paid for your work. You might have an hourly wage. We also say you get paid by the hour. So when I was younger, in the summers, I was a construction worker and I had a job where I was paid by the hour. I received hourly wages for my work. So I worked about 45 or 50 hours per week and I was paid a certain amount of money per hour. I think I was paid $6 an hour or $7 an hour. Notice I'm interchangeably saying $6 an hour or $6 per hour. Those both work. So when I was younger, I had a job where I received an hourly wage, where I was paid by the hour. Now I have a job where I receive a salary. A salary is when you receive a certain amount of money per year and your hours are less set in stone. When something is set in stone, it's very permanent. With my job right now, I'm expected to teach my classes every day. I'm expected to be at school for 8 hours a day from September until the end of June, but it's a little more flexible in terms of how I'm paid. If I work 12 hours a day or if I work just 8 hours a day, I get the same amount of money. So the school has decided that I will get a certain amount of money for the whole year. And it's my job then to make sure I work at least the full workday, but sometimes I do need to work more. If you're wondering why teachers have the summer off, it's because most teachers work a 7 or 8 hour day at school, and then they usually work an additional hour or 2 at night, sometimes 3 hours. So the idea is that teachers kind of work about 50, 60 hours a week for 10 months. And then we get a little bit of a break. So that's kind of nice. Sometimes when you have a job where you're paid by the hour or where you are paid hourly wages, your boss might ask you to work overtime. So normally maybe you work 40 hours a week, but there's a really big project that needs to get done. Your boss might say, hey, can you work overtime this weekend? Can you work late tonight? Can you put in a few extra hours for me so that we can get this done? So your boss might ask you to work overtime, or your boss might ask you to work late. Let me just check. Yes. Your boss might ask you to come in on Saturday. That's the phrase we use. Your boss might say, hey, can you come in on Saturday morning? We really want to get this project done. If you could come in Saturday and work 5 or 6 hours, that would be great. So your boss might ask you to work overtime. So he or she might say, hey, can you work overtime this weekend? Can you work late tonight? Can you come in on Saturday and work a few hours? Or can you come in early? This is my least favorite one. My least favorite question from my boss is, can you come in early tomorrow? I'd rather work late or I'd rather work on a Saturday. So, but yes, this only happens if you have a job where you're paid by the hour. If you have a salary job, your boss might ask this as well, but it wouldn't be called overtime because when you work overtime, you get paid extra. If you are paid a salary, you might be asked to work late, but if you are on an hourly wage and your boss asks you to work overtime or to work late, you would get paid extra. That means you would get more money per hour, possibly. And then another thing you might get from your place of work is a bonus. So every year at my job, we get a bonus at Christmas. We get a little envelope and there's a special gift inside. It's usually a gift card that we can use to take our family out to eat. But some people get money as a Christmas bonus. Some people, when they finish a job or project early at work, they might get paid extra money. They might get a bonus for getting the job done early. So bonuses are really cool to have. I used a phrase in there, place of work. I don't think I talked about that yet. We often refer to the place where we work as our place of work. So my place of work is a school. Your place of work might be a restaurant. Your place of work might be a hospital. It's kind of a little term we use to refer to the place where we work, place of work. So some simpler words here. You, of course, if you have a job, have a boss. A boss is the person who either owns the business or has been hired to be the boss, okay? So when I was younger, when I worked for my uncle, he owned a business and he was the boss. Right now, I work at a school. My employer is the school, and they have hired a person to be my boss. So the boss at a place of work can be the person who owns the business, or it can be a person who has been hired to be a boss. It could be one or the other. If you work in a larger place of business, you might have a supervisor or a manager. If you work somewhere and there are only 5 or 6 people that work there, you'll probably just have a boss. But if you work somewhere where 50 or 100 people work there, you will probably have supervisors or managers. These are people who they're kind of your boss, but they report to a bigger boss above them. So if you look at the structure of a business, a large business will have a boss, and then they'll have a lot of supervisors or managers, and then they'll have a lot of workers or employees at the bottom. So workers and employees don't talk to the boss directly. Instead, they have a manager or supervisor who is in charge of them. So it's their job to make sure you get your work done. The people you work with are called your colleagues, or they're called your coworkers. You can use either word. I often use these words interchangeably. I'll say, oh, the other day a colleague used a really funny English phrase, or the other day a coworker used a really funny English phrase. So colleague and coworker, completely interchangeable, okay? At work, I have a number of colleagues. I don't work at a large school, but I work with over 30 people. I have 30 coworkers. I have 30 colleagues that I work with. There's different kinds of work. You might have what's called shift work. Shift work is when you might work, so a normal job, I guess I can use the word normal. A normal job, you work from maybe 8 till 4. Maybe you work from 9 to 5. That's a common way to refer to a job as well. You could say, oh, I need to get a 9 to 5 job. But most people I know who work in Canada, they work from 7 till 4, or they work from 7 till 4:30, or they work from 8 till 5. I don't really know anyone that works from 9 to 5. That's not a very long work day. Most people work maybe 8:30 to 4:30. So that's normal. But sometimes where you work might have shift work. So you might work the day shift. You might work the afternoon shift. You might work the night shift. Or we also have what's called the graveyard shift, which is in the middle of the night. So shift work happens outside of what you would call a normal workday. I had a friend who worked at a steel factory, and he worked the night shift. So he was a shift worker. He would work the night shift for a few weeks, and then he would work the afternoon shift for a few weeks, and then he would work the night shift again. So he would sleep during the day because he was always working at a different time than most of the world. Many of you probably know people, or you yourselves are a shift worker. If you are a nurse, you probably have night shifts or afternoon shifts or day shifts. You work because you like your job, but you also work because you want to get a paycheck. A paycheck is what the place of business gives you in exchange for your work. So I currently get a paycheck. I get paid 2 times per month. I get paid directly. I don't actually get a check like this anymore. It all happens electronically through the internet. So I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, but I actually don't get the physical document. I don't get a piece of paper saying, give Bob the Canadian this much money for his work, okay? But you work because you want to get a paycheck. And usually if you do get a paycheck, you will get a pay stub or a pay slip with the paycheck. This is simply a printout of how much you worked, how much income tax they took off. In Canada, the government takes part of your paycheck. So when I get paid, you know, if my job gives me $500, the government takes like 200 of it. Comes right off my paycheck. So on your pay stub or pay slip, they will tell you that. So I don't get an actual paycheck anymore, but I get a pay stub still in my mailbox at work. Every 2 weeks, I get a pay stub saying, we paid you this amount. Here is the money we took off for benefits and income tax, et cetera, et cetera. One of the nicest things about having a job is the times during the day when you don't have to work. We have something called coffee break. We sometimes call it morning break or afternoon break. Generally, if you have a job, you have 2 coffee breaks every day. You usually have one at 10 or 10:30 in the morning, and you usually have another one sometime mid-afternoon. You don't have to drink coffee when you have a coffee break. In fact, Rod and I chat usually once a week via Skype, and I call it coffee break, but neither of us drink coffee. But we do use the term coffee break, like, how long is your coffee break at work? Oh, we get 10 minutes. So again, a coffee break is a short break, usually in the morning, the middle of the morning, the middle of the afternoon, and it's usually about 10 to 15 minutes. You also get a lunch break. You might call it lunchtime, or you might just call it lunch. But when you have lunch break, usually it's about half an hour. Some people get a whole hour for lunch. I get about 40 minutes for lunch at work. So my lunch break is 40 minutes long. And during my lunch break, if I want, I can go to the lunch room or the break room. Depending on where you work, you might have a lunch room or break room if you work in a large building. At my school, we also call it the staff room because it's a school. That's a unique name for schools. But when I worked in a restaurant, we actually had a small break room where you could go on your break. You might take a working lunch. Sometimes at school, even though I have 40 minutes to have lunch, I might take a working lunch. So a working lunch is when you work and you eat at the same time. Sometimes at work, we will have a meeting at lunch. We will have a lunchtime meeting, and we will eat our lunch while we meet with other teachers to discuss things. It's not super common. It's better to take a break, but sometimes I have a working lunch at school. Let me just check where I'm at. We had this slide last week. Someone who is a workaholic is someone who works too much. This is different than your boss asking you to work overtime. Someone who is a workaholic decides that they want to work more than they should. They get up early to go to work. They work a long day and they come home really late at night. They are a workaholic. Maybe even after they get home from work, they still keep working. It's not good to be a workaholic. It can cause stress and eventually it can cause burnout. One of the things people like is when they get a raise. If you are getting paid $20 per hour and your boss says, I'm going to give you $21 an hour starting next week, we would say that you got a raise. It's really nice to get a raise. I get a small raise every year to accommodate inflation. So if inflation, I'm not going to explain inflation, but if inflation is 1%, then I get a 1% raise every year. So a raise is when if you make a certain amount of money and then your place of work starts paying you more. It's nice to get a raise. Sometimes you can ask for a raise. At my work, you can't ask for a raise. Everything that what people are paid as teachers is decided. You can't ask for a raise. But if I was a construction worker and I was really good at it, I might be able to ask my boss for a raise. If you don't have a job, we use the phrase to apply for a job. So if you are out of work or if you are unemployed, we might say that you need to apply for a job. So someone who is looking for work is going to go out to apply for a job every day. They might apply for more than one job every day because not having a job isn't fun. I mean, it might be fun for a day or two, but then it's nice to find a job. When a place of business decides that they want you as a worker, we would say that they are hiring you. It's nice to get hired. I remember when I got hired at the school I work at now, I was super excited because I was young. I was still in university. I had 1 semester to go, but I came and I applied for the job and I was hired. I was very, very happy to get hired. Yeah, Brett, we get an automatic raise every year. It's actually, I think there's a map somewhere that shows if you go from Florida to Canada and you look at how much teachers get paid, the further north you go, the better the pay is. I think where you are versus the southern states, you probably do get paid better, I think, if that map is still accurate. If your boss doesn't like you, or if you do something wrong at work, you might get fired. It is not fun to get fired. It's not fun to lose a job because you have bad job performance. Maybe you've made a lot of mistakes. Maybe you just don't get along with your colleagues and you're fighting all the time. Maybe you're just lazy and late for work and you just don't do the job well. There are many reasons to get fired, but it's not an enjoyable thing at all. Sometimes, though, you lose your job because they lay you off. When layoffs refer to a time when let's say a business has 10 workers and sales are down. Whatever product the business is selling, sales are down. So they might say, we need to lay off 2 people. There's going to be layoffs. We are going to lay off 2 people. 2 people are going to be laid off. Notice I used a number of variations of that word and phrase, but definitely when you get laid off, it's not fun. And you would describe someone in this way as well. Like, oh, Joe got laid off. Yeah, Joe's laid off right now. Did you hear Joe's laid off? Yeah, he's looking for work. So yeah, there was a lot of layoffs at his company. So right now he's laid off. Not fun to get laid off. And then we have a phrase, to be married to your work. And this goes along with the phrase or the word workaholic. So someone who is married to their work, people meet and people fall in love and they get married. And then they spend the rest of their lives together. They spend every waking moment together. Well, some people might feel married to their work. So it's like they spend so much time working. It feels like they're married to their work. It's just kind of a funny term that we use. And then here's the last thing. I think most of you know this. In English, when you want to know what someone does for work, when you want to know what someone's job is, you actually use this phrase. What do you do for a living? You might say, what do you do for work? But generally we do say, hey, what do you do for a living? You might say, where do you work? Yeah, both would work. But I think generally if I met someone, I would say, hey, what do you do for a living? If they were a younger person, I might say, are you still in school? Or what do you do for a living? Or what do you do for work?